YouTube says it has had enough of vaccine misinformation on its site.
And false stories from phony sites to run circles around major news outlets.
Many people don't know the difference between something real and something created to deceive them.
Open your eyes.
If you've ever had this feeling that something was terribly wrong with the world that we live in, but you couldn't figure out just what it was, then you've come to the right place. Secret societies, mystery religions, and the Illuminati have been controlling our reality since the beginning of time. But not anymore, because there is an awakening happening, and you are about to become a part of it. Wake up, because this is a call for an uprising.
The devastating flooding in central Texas, at least 24 people killed, and the urgent search going on right now for more than 20 girls missing from a summer camp, completely destroyed by the raging waters. ABC's Maria Villarreal is on the ground there in Kerrville, Texas. Maria, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Whit. As of right now, we are standing on the banks of the Guadalupe River, and this is not what it normally looks like. You can actually see, even though the rain has subsided for now, all of the devastation and debris clearly right behind us. Crews in this area coming from all over the place and working throughout the night to try and find the missing.
This morning, search and rescue crews desperately looking for the missing following the deadly floods in central Texas. The storm killing at least 24 people, with many more still missing. Families pleading for information after more than 20 children still unaccounted for from a summer camp.
I have assured all of the local officials here, whatever these communities need, the state of Texas is going to step up and provide it.
The city of Kerrville seeing some of the worst devastation, urging residents to evacuate and move to higher ground. The mayor issuing a disaster declaration as the Guadalupe River reaching 26 feet high, the second highest recorded height in history. 12 inches of rainfall in a matter of hours, flooding roads, buildings, and cars, and sweeping away houses. Entire neighborhoods left unrecognizable. This RV park completely destroyed. The same flood waters almost sweeping away this man and his wife.
We went ahead and jumped out, and we got washed down 3 houses, and we finally ended up snagged on a big bush.
Helicopters hovering over trees, performing urgent rescues like this one. Crew members picking someone out of the branches. In nearby Hunt, Texas, families urgently trying to find their loved ones at Camp Mystic, an all-girls summer camp of 750 children. More than 20 campers still missing.
We will stop at nothing to ensure that every asset and person and plane and whatever is needed is going to be involved in the process of rescuing every last person.
The camp was evacuated after flooding hit the Guadalupe River, and while some parents have been reunited with their children, others continue to wait for answers. The family of one camper, 10-year-old Greta Toranzo from Houston, telling us that their daughter is still missing.
Please pray for our community. This is a hard day, and there will be hard days to come.
Absolutely devastating, obviously, for this entire community and also for the families of the missing. Some of them are actually posting pictures just like this with their names and information of many of these campers, trying to get the word out there of what their children look like, trying to aid in the rescue and the search any way they can. Meanwhile, officials are warning this community that more rain is on the way for later today. Janae?
Just unimaginable heartbreak for those families, Maria. Thank you. Let's bring in Cheryl Scott from our Chicago station WLS. And Cheryl, what can you tell us about this flooding?
Yes, and more flooding expected throughout the morning into the afternoon. Just catastrophic damage in this region. And obviously, we've been talking about those fatalities. We are looking at some of the scenes coming out of this area, and you can just see that destruction, the raging waters. We have impacts and destruction to homes. You can see the trees down, and then this is overlooking the Llano River in Texas right now, and you can clearly see the raging, rushing water here, clearly overflowing its banks. More rain on the way, and that's why we do have alerts up in effect for parts of central Texas. We have that flash flood emergency, which has been issued for parts of Travis and Burnett County throughout the morning, with an additional 5 to 10 inches of rainfall in this area. So more flash flooding and destructive flooding will be a concern throughout the day today.
This is a call for an uprising. Welcome to today's show. I had to do a video on this absolute terrible tragedy that has occurred in Texas. And again, every time there is some type of a storm, I try not to say, hey, it's HAARP, hey, it's weather modification, hey, it's those 5G towers. But we have to look at the constant suspicious themes that surround these types of stories. Like, for example, how these areas just continue to get ravaged day after day in the same exact locations. That's more than just a flash flood. What they're calling it is obviously a flash flood, but when you see them continually hitting a spot, it might as well have a bullseye on it. And we know that all we see going on with weather modification and owning the weather by 2025 is that these people are wiping out areas. They're like land developers. They're clearing out specific zones. And then you won't hear about what's going on in these locations ever again. You won't find out what's being built there. And in the case of what's happening in Texas, we start with obviously the story about all of these missing girls. And it breaks your heart. And the fact that we have all of these missing girls who happen to be a member of a Christian camp should automatically raise suspicions, right? Now think about the common themes here. Remember in Lahaina, all of those children that went missing right after those fires that we know that they started? Now all of a sudden we have a hit in Texas where all of these young girls are just randomly missing, where nobody can find the bodies of these young girls. And that should raise people's suspicions immediately. We remember the mainstream media came out in regards to all the missing children in Maui, and they constantly had to spin it, right? All the fact-checking garbage out there, Snoops and everything else, saying that there's no evidence that 500 children went missing in Maui. Oh, police are saying that there's false claims being made about missing children in the Maui wildfires, right? And then on top of that, you get this other suspicion that I talked about a couple of months ago when Donald Trump was put back in office. Remember, Trump came out and he said that they were going to make cuts to the National Weather Service. And I talked about it at the time, and I said, all that means is that people are going to be getting hit out of nowhere because they're going to have no heads up. We're going to have these pop-up flash floods. We're going to have pop-up blizzards. We're going to have pop-up hurricanes. And that's exactly what's happening now, because the headlines out there are all blaming Donald Trump for the severe cuts to NOAA. There's about a dozen stories at least coming out just today talking about the missing girls and how Donald Trump can be directly blamed for everything that's happening in Texas. Texas officials slammed Trump's National Weather Service for bad forecast. Now, they're not getting rid of these weather towers, that's for sure, because they use them for weather modification. But obviously, just like we know with RFK playing the role of, oh, we're going to shut down chemtrails, right? Oh, we're going to blame DARPA for all the chemtrailing going on. These conservative states that are pretending like they're going to actually stop chemtrailing from happening. And we know that what that likely means is that they're just going to use smart dust, and more invisible things that we can't actually see are going to get dumped from these airplanes, right? As long as these things are flying over our heads, nobody out there should have any trust that the government is doing anything to stop geoengineering. Well, Trump came out of nowhere and just started talking about shutting down the National Weather Service. So this gives them an excuse to just hit locations without giving the people a fair warning to evacuate these locations. And remember the warnings that I gave earlier in the year about how they've been moving people into red states and blue states. And it seems like Texas, more so than any other state, just continues to get hampered with these hurricanes, with these blizzards, with these flash flood events, and how convenient that it is a predominantly Christian conservative state. So when I talk to people about weather modification and geoengineering, I think we start no further than showing them documentation like owning the weather by 2025. I mean, this is from the Air Force. This isn't some document that we all printed on the internet. This is a government document. You could go on the Air Force's website and look it up for yourself, and you could read through it. And you could see the thousands of patents that they actually have, right? I'm showing them to you on the screen right now. All of these years, they've been working on this. They've been mastering this, right? And conveniently now we're going to be told, oh, we're going to shut down the National Weather Service. Well, that's clearly because they don't want to give anybody a heads up on how to get out, where to go. Now, the other stuff that I just said earlier, that's really a main concern here, that we have missing children once again, right? We connect the dots with Lahaina, then you look at this story, and suddenly you have Christian children who have gone missing. So state officials said that at least 24 people have died in the catastrophic flood that swept through Kerr County early Friday morning, and 25 girls from Camp Mystic, a private Christians girls camp, are still unaccounted for. So you have 24 people dead, and then you have 23 people who are unaccounted for. And of course it's a Christian camp, right? A girls camp called Camp Mystic. So in a news conference, Greg Abbott, of course, the World Economic Forum puppet that Greg Abbott is, the amount of blood that these guys have on their hands is just, it's unimaginable, you know? People out there who have families, who have children, can you imagine that your kids are gone and then you know that the government has the ability to control weather, to modify weather. They brag about doing it. They brag about geoengineering. They tell you that they can make it rain in Dubai. But then when people like us bring it up, they all look at us like we have 10 heads. They're like, you can't control the weather. Huh? Oh, no. Why do they admit that they could do it in Dubai? What, does Dubai have the ability, but they don't have the ability here in America? Or how about all of the stuff I've talked about with the Aurora Borealis? How many states suddenly can see the northern lights? And people out there are just believing what they're getting fed from the government, as if they're not doing experiments with the weather on a day in, day out basis. The blood on their hands is just unimaginable. And how they do this with a smile on their face and then call the rest of us stupid, censor the rest of us, and don't allow us to actually try to communicate this with people. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. So again, they're going to get hit with more and more weather in this exact same location. How many videos did I do this year talking about when some of these hurricanes hit specific locations, right? When we had Helene, we've had so many over the last couple of months. And then they tell you on the news, they're like, yeah, and it's coming back tonight. There's going to be more flash flooding tonight. And you go, well, I thought that these things were supposed to like move away. And they're like, no, it's circling back. Some of the wordage that they use, they flat out tell you, oh yeah, and it's coming back around. It's not like the storm is hitting and then there's a follow-up storm coming. They tell you on the news that these things are circling back. That's the wordage that they use. And people out there don't say boo about it, right? And then when you throw in missing children, how could you not actually be suspicious about what happened to all of these girls? And for anybody out there that's new to this stuff, I'm going to put in some clips now about the government admitting to weather modification and weather control. And again, it doesn't mean that every single storm we got to look at it and we got to say weather modification. But when you see suspicious activity, when you see repetition in the stories, like missing children, or the fact that they can lump this in, like I mentioned earlier in the year with Trump, and say, well, Trump's response, we got a faulty weather report because he's shutting down the weather services because he's a climate change denier. And then people out there just get angry about it. And they continue to make these things into a left and right scheme. That's all that this stuff actually is. So here's just some clips for people out there who are not familiar with weather modification. I feel like over the years, I put together some of my best videos showing you these people speaking in Congress, talking about the ability the government has to actually do this. I've shown you it with earthquakes, with hurricanes, with blizzards, tornadoes. Yet people out there still somehow deny it because at a young age, what do they beat in your head? You can't control Mother Nature. How many times do we hear that growing up? You can't control Mother Nature. Well, quite the opposite. Believe the opposite of what they tell you because that's just conditioning and programming. And that's why it's so difficult for us to wake people up to weather modification. Now, I'm not taking anything away from God. I'm not saying that God's ultimately not in control, because of course God is in control. But people out there don't give credit to the fact that these people are so wicked and so evil that they do this to people and they don't even blink. They don't even blink. They feel, and look, we know this is in a lot of their books, right? The Talmud, the Zohar, talking about all of us as if we're cattle. They look at us as if we're insects. That's what they look at us as. So to think for 1 second that they wouldn't do this to the rest of us, that they wouldn't wipe out entire communities when in the blink of an eye and not care, yeah, well, obviously they don't care. So for anybody out there, again, here's some clips, because obviously all of my content, as most of you know, has been completely removed from the internet again. Some people out there seem to be able to speak year after year after year, but me, well, I can't even speak week after week at this point. But these are clips that are important for people to see, so check these out.
When you hear the name Bill Gates, you probably think Microsoft founder, but now the billionaire may be known as the hurricane tamer. Gates is listed as one of 13 inventors on a patent filed for hurricane prevention methods. Hurricanes gain strength from condensation driven by warm surface water, which leads to greater wind speeds. Gates and his team plan to use a fleet of ships to cool warm surface water by mixing it with colder water from greater depths. They hope this will sap energy from growing storms, leading to weaker, less devastating hurricanes. The patent, which isn't expected to be approved for another 18 months, was submitted by Seareed LLC, a sub-entity of an Intellectual Ventures and an invention acquisition and development firm.
We shall propose further cooperative efforts between all the nations in weather prediction and eventually in weather control.
It lays the predicate foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
This is the loudest sound you could possibly conceive, and as it turns out, the cleanest. That cloud up there, which was generated by the engine, is just a mixture of hydrogen and oxygen. It's water vapor. And in about an hour's time, someone in Mississippi is going to get wet washing. It will actually rain. I told you. It's raining. NASA's playing God. It's making its own weather.
Project Cirrus is the first official attempt to modify a hurricane. It was run by General Electric with the support of the U.S. military. The official theory was that by changing the temperature outside the eye wall of a hurricane, which they did by seeding the clouds with various compounds such as silver iodide, a decrease in strong winds will result. On October 13th, 1947, Project Cirrus targeted a hurricane heading out to sea. Approximately 180 pounds of dry ice was dropped into the clouds. The crew then reported a pronounced modification of the cloud deck, and the hurricane abruptly changed direction and made landfall near Savannah, Georgia. The public blamed the government. Irving Langmuir, who pioneered General Electric's atmospheric research department and admitted that the project was about learning how to weaponize the weather, also claimed the reversal of the hurricane had been caused by Project Cirrus. But the government denied it for 12 years.
Another example is the array of technologies, often referred to collectively as geoengineering, that potentially could help reverse the warming effects of global climate change. One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection, or SAI, a method of seeding the stratosphere with particles that can help reflect the sun's heat in much the same way that volcanic eruptions do. An SAI program could limit global temperature increases, reducing some risks associated with higher temperatures and providing the world economy additional time to transition from fossil fuels. This process is also relatively inexpensive. The National Research Council estimates that a fully deployed SAI program would cost about $10 billion yearly. As promising as it may be, moving forward on SAI would also raise a number of challenges for our government and for the international community. On the technical side, greenhouse gas emission reductions would still have to accompany SAI to address other climate change effects, such as ocean acidification, because SAI alone would not remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. On the geopolitical side, the technology's potential to alter weather patterns and benefit certain regions of the world at the expense of other regions could trigger sharp opposition by some nations. Others might seize on SAI's benefits and back away from their commitment to carbon dioxide reductions. On the geopolitical side, the technology's potential to alter weather patterns and benefit certain regions of the world at the expense of other regions could trigger sharp opposition by some nations. On the geopolitical side, the technology's potential to alter weather patterns and benefit certain regions of the world at the expense of other regions could trigger sharp opposition by some nations.
So what we have here, according to us, to the Senate and Congress and other people, are folks that will look you straight in the face and say, well, the idea of weather control, creation of earthquakes electronically and all of that's absolutely ridiculous, Mr. Fletcher, or anyone else that might ask it. However, we find out that our nation 20 years ago actually went into an entire convention that said, now that we can do it, we promise that we won't use it against other countries. Well, unfortunately, that promise does not include using it against ourselves here in the United States. So, again, when Senator Cole had asked me what it was that I meant, inferring that the New World Order persons will utilize it as a weapon against us, that was what I meant. A friend of mine said, there's patents on that equipment. And as you can see here, he's absolutely right. These are the paperwork of the actual patents on the electronic means by which waves or rays, if you will, can be utilized to block, stop, move, alter, change the weather. It includes creating storms, expanding them, and even generating ELF, low-frequency vibrations that actually can move Earth in the ground itself and possibly generate the possibility of earthquakes. But the very equipment that's being used presently, covertly, secretly, in a multitude of outrageous experiments and programs right now, the application of magnetics, electronics, electronic waves, and what have you.
So again, all we can do when we see these stories is pray for these children, pray for their families who are going to be grieved. I mean, this is devastating, right? This is like waking up one morning. You know, this isn't like, and not that, you know, cancer and these other things aren't devastating. Of course they are. But this is like waking up and your kid's going to camp and it's a blue sky day. And then that night your kid is missing because they got wiped out in a supposed flood that we know, obviously in the case of Lahaina, there was children that were taken off of that island. So that wouldn't surprise me either. We know how, I mean, we can go back to the blood libel. They've always lusted for the blood of Christian children. Okay, that's the origins of vampires. If you're new to my website, Nosferatu, all these stories, Bram Stoker. These stories have truth behind them. They've always lusted after the children of Christians. It's a bloodlust that they have. So pray for all of these families that are affected, even people who just lose their home. Can't even imagine how devastating that is to wake up and not have a home anymore, not have a car anymore. Yeah, sure, these are earthly possessions, but you could sit there and say it until it happens to you, right? And you don't have a roof over your head, or you don't have a car anymore, or your kids go missing because the government has decided they want to master weather modification and weather control so that they have the ability to enslave humanity with climate laws. And people out there still don't blink. So I had to do a video on this. Obviously, it's just very, very upsetting when you see this stuff and you think of, you know, some of the thing, you know, I mean, look, the kids could very well have been abducted for all we know, you know? I mean, we can't take, you know, anything on the news as being actual credible information, but we could obviously see with our own eyes the devastation that's going on in Texas from people posting on their own social media accounts, right? To posting, you know, these towns that are completely underwater. So is it likely that these kids got washed up somewhere? I don't know. I don't know. But all we can do is pray for these children and these families affected by your psychotic government that continues to do everything that they can to destroy our lives, censor our speech, and then tell us what's really responsible for. Well, people only knew. You got some of the sickest people you could possibly imagine who are controlling this type of technology. I thank everybody for being here again. Hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families, as always.